Good morning. How are you? Okay, I know we may be late, but we use the remaining time to do what we can. Remember, probably this week we're only meeting between today and Wednesday. Okay. For those of you who missed test 2, there's test 2 coming up tomorrow for degree students. So if you missed test 2, you can find yourself there. Let me just know, then we can make you the test 2 for diplomas. Okay. And that will be done later. I think, is it next week? There'll be a group of degree students will be writing test 1. Again, we can make arrangements that we have some slots for diplomas. Okay, in the previous class, we were looking at the education reforms, isn't it? Okay, specifically our interest was to focus on the recommendations of those reforms. We did mention that these reforms, they were initiated in 1966 and were later on subjected to a debate amongst the citizens, parents, and other stakeholders in terms of the proposals of what was supposed to be in the education system. Among the recommendations that we had looked at was extending basic education from 7 years to 9 years. Other recommendations were the proposed work start policy for learners who were required to acquire some skills as they were studying. Other proposals were to reform the teacher training at the University of Zambia in order to accommodate and train teachers who were basically teaching by then. And then also there was some proposal to revise the curriculum. Okay, in today's class, our shift will be on 2 things, and those are the objectives of the day. That is to discuss the success of the reforms. That is to discuss the success of the education reforms. Education reforms of 1977. And then also the second objective will be to discuss the failures of these reforms. Okay. And that is how the question on this particular topic gets to be complete. When you have a question on reforms, they'll ask you to describe the recommendations, the success, and the failures. At times, if it is a short question, they may just ask you on the success, or they may just ask you on the failures. Okay. Since we have described in terms of the recommendations, we look at the success. Among the success code included expansion or increase in enrollments. That is at grade 1. Okay, more learners were able to be accommodated. The second success would be, reforming teacher training. Okay, so more trained teachers were accommodated reforming teacher training at the University of Zambia. Okay, of course, because they wanted to have secondary teachers in place, as the majority of teachers who were qualified by then were only at primary level. And because of the increase in enrollments at primary, they anticipated increase in enrollments at secondary level, which required secondary teachers to be in place. Okay. Other success scored was introduction of production units in schools. Okay, introduction of production units, which made it possible for learners to acquire, survival skills. In the event that they couldn't proceed to secondary or probably tertiary level, they would have used the same skills to become productive in society, which is equivalent. If you are not able to see the desks in front, my friend, don't stress yourself. Okay. So these production units were meant to help learners acquire some skills which could make them to be productive in society, and that is equivalent to what we are having at this particular time, when the government has emphasized on skills development to be integrated at all levels of education. All right. Apart from this, the curriculum was also revised. That is another success. The curriculum was revised again to further reflect the local content as opposed to the way it was at independence. Okay, but these are some of the success that could be attributed to these education reforms. We did mention that we only have two objectives to look at. The second objective will be to discuss the failures. Okay, what could be the failures attributed to the initiation of these education policies, these education reforms? So on the failures, the first one, in fact, among other success scored we can attribute to, the last one could be the introduction of what is called parent teachers associations. Okay, what is called what? PTAs, okay, which were meant to make teachers, schools, teachers and parents to work together for the purpose of improving the education system, or for the purpose of supporting children who are going to school at the time. Okay, and we see these particular associations being quite relevant even up to now, and they have contributed in terms of undertaking projects in schools. And in some of the schools where you come from, you probably could have seen even what purchase of buses and labeled PTA buses, isn't it? Which is of course the contributions of parents towards that particular school. Sometimes certain schools have built classrooms as a result of the contributions by these parent teachers associations. So this could be cited as some of the successes which were scored through the reforms. Okay. Next, we'll look at the failures. So among the failures that we'll cite, one of them will be opposition from parents. Opposition from parents in the work start policy. Okay, opposition from parents in work start policy, which meant learners were supposed to be studying and some kind of doing manual labor at the same time for the purpose of acquiring skills. The reason the parents opposed this was the fact that they were thinking that we have sent our children to school in order to become professionals and not to become laborers. Okay. So for them, they thought that was a waste of time, and the fact that learners were given those tasks which would require manual labor, parents thought that was a waste of time which could have been used for study. Okay. The second failure can be attributed to, again, lack of financial resources to support all the recommendations which the reforms had made. As at the time, copper prices went down, so the Zambian economy, copper prices were low. And hence, the Zambian economy could not have sufficient resources to fund and expand the education system. Okay. Reason being that, among other recommendations, that we had looked, they had opted to expand. They opted to expand both primary and secondary level in terms of infrastructure development, and all this had required huge resources for them to do those expansions. The same applies to teacher training, that required resources. So the government, because the copper prices were down and the Zambian economy was not performing well, it meant that the intentions to implement these reforms could not be achieved successfully. Okay. So these were some of the failures encountered by these education reforms. Probably also other failures can be attributed to some parents not wanting to take their children to school as they thought it was a waste of time. Okay. Some parents would prefer marrying their children off than sending them to school. Okay. Do you still have parents who are thinking like that during this period? Few of them. Would rather exchange you with cows rather than you going to school, isn't it? Okay, so that was some of the challenges that could that can be cited. Among other challenges, again, that we can cite could be, despite the intention of governments expanding infrastructure development, there's still limited number of schools in place. Okay, both primary and secondary. They were not available in all the communities. Okay, just like the period at independence. Okay, so that is how this question is dealt with. Now, so like I said, they usually ask you, just give you discuss the education reforms of 1977 and show how this has contributed to the education system in Zambia, okay, or how this has contributed to the development of the education system in Zambia. Okay, it means that you'll be required to write on those three parts. First of all, you write about the introduction. You know what the reforms were all about. You specify these reforms were initiated in 1966 and they were meant to improve the education system within Zambia. They were initiated in 1966 and were only implemented in 1977 after a period of 6 months debate amongst the citizens and parents and other stakeholders. Of course, the policies were also translated in local languages and heard both on radio and TV, so that people could be able to watch, to deliberate them, to contribute. And then you talk about the recommendations. From the recommendations, you come to the success. From the success, then you come to what? To the failures. And then you make your conclusion. It means that you are done with the question. Any questions on that? Yes.
You say some financial constraints due to high cost.
Okay, financial constraints. That is what we're trying to. We said usually the economy at that time, Zambia entirely depended on what? Production of copper. Okay. So when copper prices were low at the London Metal Exchange, it meant that there were no foreign reserves coming into the country. And as a result of copper not being bought by, the foreign countries, it meant that even the mining industry was down. Okay, people were retrenchment, or people stopped working. Okay, people were they had gone into early retirement and without benefits, and parents, as a result, could not even have money to send their children to school. Okay, so, and when the mining industry was paralyzed, it meant that even other sectors of the economy could not function well. Okay, because it is that triple effect, isn't it?
Yes.
So it meant that the levels of income at the family level and national level were not productive. Okay, and that had an impact on what? On the education system. Because if your parents are not having money, do you know what will happen? TVTC will not have money. When TVTC doesn't have money, the teachers will not have money, isn't it? When teachers do not have money, even their children cannot go to school. You see how the connection is.
Yes.
So that was what was happening. Yes?
On the last point, on the failure.
On the failures, yes.
Why you said that limited enrollment of schools. The last point on the failures.
On the failures, what did I say?
The last point.
limited number of schools. Okay, remember we did say that they had anticipated, they wanted to increase enrollment, both primary and secondary. Okay. But not every community had schools in place. Okay. People could not still find, schools within the walkable distances. Okay, some were forced to walk long distances to get to the nearest school. Okay, so that was still one of the failures, despite the government having the intention of ensuring that they provide education, they make education as accessible as possible. Okay, so that was what was at this particular time. Any other question? Yes?
Is there a connection between the Act of 1966 and the reforms?
Okay, is there the connection? The Act was, we did say that the Act was the first policy document in terms of how the new government wanted the education system to run. Okay, now, after the Act was in place for a period of about 10 years, remember 1966, that is when the Act was made. Is it 1966? Then 1976, 10 years later, they wanted to do the revising. They wanted to revise the Act. Okay, they wanted to come up with new proposals in terms of how the education system is run. And in 1977, these proposals were implemented. Okay, so the formulation of these education reforms was, they wanted to reform what was initially in 1966. Because in 1966, the first education document was provided. Now they wanted to make some changes, okay, how best they can be able to manage the education system away from what was initially in this document. Okay. Thank you so much. In the next class, in the next class we are going to be doing principles for education development. That is tomorrow, isn't it? We only have tomorrow, and when is